The morning sun cast long shadows across the busy London street as Sergeant Marcus Thompson adjusted his red ceremonial uniform. He had been a member of the Queen's Guard for 8 years, standing motionless for hours outside Buckingham Palace. But today was different. Today he was off duty, walking to meet his sister for lunch in the city center. Marcus loved these rare moments when he could blend into the crowd like any ordinary person. No tourists asking for photos, no need to maintain that famous stone-faced expression that had become his trademark. He walked with purpose down the bustling street, dodging between shoppers and office workers hurrying to their destinations. The traffic was particularly heavy that Tuesday afternoon. Red double-decker buses rumbled past, black taxis honked their horns, and delivery trucks blocked lanes while making their stops. Marcus had grown up in London, so the chaos felt like home to him. He knew exactly which streets to take to avoid the worst of it. As he approached the intersection near Oxford Circus, something caught his attention. A young woman was standing at the edge of the sidewalk, holding a white cane. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with long brown hair and wearing a simple blue dress. What made Marcus stop in his tracks was not just that she was blind, but the way she was positioning herself at the curb. She was clearly preparing to cross the street, but she was facing the wrong direction entirely. Instead of waiting for the pedestrian crossing signal, she had somehow become turned around and was pointing toward the middle of the busy road where cars were speeding past at full speed. The traffic light was red for pedestrians, and vehicles were racing through the intersection without any intention of stopping. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. His military training had taught him to assess dangerous situations quickly, and this was definitely one of them. The young woman raised her cane slightly, testing the ground in front of her. She was about to step directly into traffic during one of the busiest times of the day. Other pedestrians were walking past, absorbed in their phones or conversations, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Some noticed the woman with the cane but assumed she knew what she was doing. After all, blind people navigate the city every day with remarkable skill. But Marcus could see what they couldn't. She was completely disoriented. He started walking faster toward her, his mind racing. Should he call out? Would that startle her and make things worse? Should he run? But running might cause a scene and panic her. Marcus had dealt with many emergency situations during his military service, but this felt different. This was a civilian situation requiring delicacy, not the direct action he was trained for. The woman took a small step forward and Marcus felt his stomach drop. She was testing the curb with her toe, preparing to step down into the street. A large truck was approaching the intersection, its driver completely unaware of the potential tragedy about to unfold. The truck driver couldn't possibly see her from his high position, especially with other cars blocking his view. Marcus made his decision. He broke into a controlled run, weaving between the other pedestrians. His military fitness served him well as he covered the distance quickly without causing alarm. He could see the woman's foot beginning to leave the sidewalk just as the truck entered the intersection. "Excuse me, miss," Marcus called out gently as he approached, trying to keep his voice calm and non-threatening. But she either didn't hear him over the traffic noise or didn't realize he was speaking to her. Her foot touched the asphalt of the street. Without hesitation, Marcus reached out and gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "Miss, please wait," he said, his voice firm but kind. She stopped immediately, turning her head toward the sound of his voice with a look of confusion on her face. "I'm sorry to startle you," Marcus continued, positioning himself between her and the traffic. "I think you might be facing the wrong direction for the crossing. The pedestrian light is red right now and there's quite a bit of traffic coming through." The young woman's cheeks flushed red with embarrassment. "Oh no," she whispered, her grip tightening on her cane. "I got turned around. I thought I was at the crossing signal." Her voice carried a slight accent that Marcus couldn't quite place, but her English was perfect. Marcus noticed the woman's hands were shaking slightly as she held her cane. The near miss with the traffic had clearly rattled her more than she was letting on. He could see tears forming in her eyes, though she was trying hard to maintain her composure. "It's perfectly all right," Marcus said gently, his natural protective instincts taking over. These intersections can be tricky even for people who can see. "I'm Marcus, by the way. Would you like me to help you get to where you're going?" The woman hesitated for a moment, clearly torn between accepting help and maintaining her independence. "I'm Sarah," she finally replied. "Sarah Chen. I was trying to get to the National Gallery. I have a job interview there in 30 minutes. Her voice carried a note of anxiety that went beyond just getting lost. Marcus checked his watch. He was supposed to meet his sister in 20 minutes, but this felt more important. "The National Gallery, that's about a 10-minute walk from here. If we take the right route, I'd be happy to walk with you and make sure you get there safely." Sarah bit her lip, considering the offer. "I don't usually accept help from strangers," she admitted, "but I have to be honest. I'm completely turned around now, and this interview is really important to me. Are you sure you don't mind?" "Not at all," Marcus replied, already pulling out his phone to text his sister that he'd be a few minutes late. "What's the interview for, if you don't mind me asking?" As they began walking, Sarah explained that she was applying for a position as an audio tour guide at the National Gallery. She had a master's degree in art history and had been working at smaller museums, but this would be her dream job. The irony wasn't lost on either of them, someone who couldn't see applying to work at one of the world's most famous art museums. "I know it might seem strange," Sarah continued as they walked, her cane tapping rhythmically on the sidewalk. "But I experience art differently than most people. I study the history, the techniques, the stories behind the paintings. When I describe them to visitors, I paint pictures with words instead of sight." Marcus found himself genuinely impressed. "That's incredible. I bet you notice details in the stories and historical context that people miss when they're just looking at the visual aspects." Sarah's face lit up with a genuine smile, the first one Marcus had seen from her. "Exactly. People often focus so much on what they can see that they miss the deeper meanings, the historical significance, the human drama behind each piece." As they walked, Marcus noticed how skilled Sarah was at navigating the city despite her earlier confusion. She knew exactly how many steps it took to cross streets, could identify different types of vehicles by their engine sounds, and even seemed to sense when they were approaching obstacles. Her earlier disorientation had clearly been unusual for her. "Can I ask what happened back there?" Marcus said carefully. "You seem very capable of getting around independently." Sarah's expression grew more serious. "I've been having some health issues lately. Nothing dangerous," she added quickly. "But sometimes I get dizzy spells. I think that's what happened. I got disoriented when a wave of dizziness hit me, and by the time it passed, I had turned around without realizing it." They paused at a proper pedestrian crossing, and Marcus watched as Sarah listened carefully to the traffic patterns and the crossing signals. Her skills were impressive, and he could see why the earlier incident had been so unusual for her. "So, this something the doctors can help with?" Marcus asked as they waited for the light to change. "They're running some tests," Sarah replied, "but the timing is terrible. I've been trying to get this job for months if they think I'm unreliable or unsafe." She didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus could hear the worry in her voice. The light changed, and they crossed the street together. Marcus found himself thinking about his own career challenges. The military had taught him discipline and duty, but civilian life sometimes required different skills. Here was someone facing obstacles he'd never had to consider, yet she was pursuing her dreams with remarkable determination. "You know," Marcus said as they approached Trafalgar Square, "I think your unique perspective might be exactly what the National Gallery needs. Most people take their sight for granted when they visit museums. Having someone who can help them experience art through other senses could be revolutionary." Sarah squeezed his arm gently. She had taken his arm for guidance when they started walking. "Thank you for saying that, and thank you for stopping to help me earlier. I hate to think what might have happened if you hadn't been there." Marcus looked at this remarkable woman walking beside him and realized that what had started as a simple act of helping someone cross the street safely was becoming something much more significant. There was something special about Sarah Chen, and he had a feeling their paths crossing wasn't just a coincidence. As they approached the impressive columns of the National Gallery, Sarah suddenly stopped walking. Marcus could feel the tension in her arm where she was holding on to him for guidance. "I'm nervous," she admitted quietly. "What if they don't think I'm capable? What if they're just interviewing me to be polite, but they never really intended to hire someone who can't see?" Marcus turned to face her, though he realized she couldn't see his encouraging expression. "Sarah, in the 20 minutes we've been walking together, you've told me about Renaissance painting techniques, explained how you can identify different architectural periods by the sound of footsteps on various types of stone, and navigated through some of the busiest streets in London. Anyone who doesn't see your capabilities isn't worth working for." Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. "You're right. I've prepared for this for weeks. I know more about their collection than most people who work there." They climbed the steps together and Marcus helped her locate the main entrance. Just as they reached the doors, Sarah turned to him with a concerned expression. "Marcus, I just realized I've been so focused on my interview that I never asked what you do for work. And here I am, making you late for whatever you were doing. I feel terrible." Marcus hesitated for a moment. He'd enjoyed being just a regular person for the past 20 minutes, but he didn't want to lie to her. "Actually, I'm a member of the Queen's Guard. You know, the ones in the red uniforms who stand outside Buckingham Palace." Sarah's mouth fell open in surprise. "You're one of the Queen's Guards? The ones who aren't supposed to move or speak while on duty?" She started laughing, a genuine, delighted sound. "So helping lost people is definitely not part of your job description?" "Definitely not," Marcus agreed, grinning. "But helping people is part of who I am, uniform or not." Just then, Marcus noticed a small crowd of tourists had recognized him despite being out of uniform. They were pointing and whispering excitedly. A few were already pulling out their phones to take pictures. "Oh no," Sarah whispered, somehow sensing the change in atmosphere around them. "Are you going to get in trouble for being seen with me? I know the Queen's Guard has very strict rules about public appearances." Marcus looked at the growing crowd of tourists and then at Sarah, who was clearly worried about causing problems for him. In that moment, he made a decision that surprised even himself. "Sarah, would you mind if I waited for you? I'd like to know how your interview goes. I can meet my sister later." "You don't have to do that," Sarah protested, but Marcus could hear the hope in her voice. "I want to," Marcus replied simply. Sarah squeezed his hand briefly. "Okay, but only if you promise to let me buy you coffee afterward, whether the interview goes well or badly. It's the least I can do." As Sarah disappeared through the entrance doors, Marcus found himself fielding questions from the curious tourists. They wanted to know why a Queen's Guard was at the National Gallery, whether he was on some kind of special duty, and could they please take pictures with him. Marcus politely explained that he was off duty and just helping a friend, but the tourists seemed even more intrigued by this. One older American woman approached him with tears in her eyes. "Excuse me, young man," she said with a thick Southern accent. "I saw you helping that blind girl earlier. My granddaughter is blind and she's been afraid to go anywhere alone since she lost her sight in an accident last year. Seeing how confidently that young lady navigated the city, and seeing your kindness in helping her, well, it gives me hope." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. "Your granddaughter sounds very brave, ma'am. I'm sure she'll find her confidence again with time and support." The woman patted his arm. "You're one of the good ones. The Queen should be proud to have you, representing her." As more people gathered, Marcus found himself answering questions about Sarah without meaning to. He explained about her expertise in art history and her unique approach to experiencing museums. Before he knew it, he was practically giving a speech about how people with disabilities often have perspectives and abilities that others overlook. A young journalist who happened to be passing by heard parts of the conversation and approached Marcus. "Excuse me, I'm with the London Herald. Would you be willing to talk about what happened today? This sounds like a wonderful human interest story." Marcus hesitated. The Queen's Guard weren't supposed to seek publicity, but this wasn't about him. It was about Sarah and others like her who deserved recognition for their abilities rather than pity for their disabilities. Inside the gallery, Sarah was halfway through what felt like the most important interview of her life. The curator, Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, had been asking increasingly complex questions about the gallery's collection, and Sarah had been answering with confidence and detail that clearly impressed the interview panel. "Miss Chen," Dr. Hartwell said, "I have to ask about the incident mentioned in your application. You noted that you sometimes experience mobility challenges due to a medical condition. How would this affect your ability to guide tours safely?" Sarah had been dreading this question, but she answered honestly, "I have a condition that occasionally causes mild dizziness. It's being treated and episodes are rare, but I believe in full transparency. I would never guide a tour if I was experiencing symptoms, and I always carry emergency contacts. My condition doesn't affect my knowledge or my ability to engage with visitors. It just means I need to be extra careful about spatial awareness on the rare occasions when it acts up." The panel exchanged glances, and Sarah felt her heart sink. She was sure they were already writing her off as too much of a liability. Dr. Hartwell leaned forward in her chair, studying Sarah with keen interest. "Miss Chen, I want you to try something for me. I'm going to describe a painting that's not currently on display, and I want you to tell our visitors what they should understand about it beyond just what they can see." Sarah nodded, her confidence returning slightly. This was where she felt most at home. "The painting is Caravaggio's The Supper at Emmaus from 1601, Dr. Hartwell continued. A man in simple robes sits at a table with two other figures. There's fruit on the table and dramatic lighting coming from the left side." Sarah closed her eyes briefly, then began to speak with passion and knowledge that filled the room. "What visitors need to understand is that they're witnessing the moment when the disciples recognize the risen Christ. But Caravaggio painted this scene in a Roman tavern, not a grand biblical setting. The man reaching toward Christ isn't wearing ancient robes. He's dressed like a 16th century Roman pilgrim." She paused, then continued with growing excitement. "The fruit on the table isn't just decoration. That's a basket of fruit at the very edge, about to fall. It represents the fragility of life and faith. When visitors look at this painting, they should feel the shock and recognition the disciples felt. Caravaggio painted religious scenes, with real people from the streets showing that divine moments happen in ordinary places with ordinary people." The room fell silent for a moment. Dr. Hartwell exchanged glances with the other panel members, and Sarah felt her stomach twist with worry. "Miss Chen," Dr. Hartwell said finally, "in 30 years of working in museums, I've rarely heard someone bring a painting to life so vividly. You've just demonstrated exactly what we've been looking for. Someone who can help visitors see art with their hearts and minds, not just their eyes." Outside, Marcus was growing increasingly concerned about Sarah's interview. It had been over an hour, and he'd noticed several people entering and leaving the building who looked like they might be job candidates. The crowd of tourists around him had grown larger, and the journalist was still asking questions. "So you just happened to see this young lady about to walk into traffic?" the journalist pressed. "And you didn't know she was blind until you approached her?" Marcus nodded. "I just saw someone who needed help. It could have been anyone. An elderly person, someone distracted by their phone, a tourist who didn't understand the traffic patterns. We look out for each other in this city." A teenage girl in the crowd spoke up. "My mom always told me that the Queen's Guards are chosen not just for how they look in uniform, but for their character. I guess she was right." Marcus felt uncomfortable with all the attention, but he noticed something interesting happening in the crowd. People were sharing their own stories about helping strangers, about times when someone had helped them, about family members with disabilities who'd overcome challenges. Sarah's story was inspiring conversations about kindness and capability. Just then, the gallery doors opened, and Sarah emerged with Dr. Hartwell and two other staff members. Marcus could tell immediately from Sarah's expression that something significant had happened, but he couldn't tell if it was good or bad news. Dr. Hartwell was saying, "We'll be in touch within the next few days, but I want you to know that your interview was exceptional. Your knowledge and passion for art history are exactly what our visitors need to experience." Sarah was nodding, but Marcus could see she was holding back tears. As the gallery staff went back inside, Sarah stood at the top of the steps, clearly overwhelmed. Marcus approached her carefully. "Sarah, how did it go?" She turned toward his voice, and he could see that her tears were happy ones. "Marcus, I think I actually got the job. Dr. Hartwell said they'd never had an interview quite like mine. She said I made her see paintings differently than she had in 20 years of working there." The crowd that had gathered around Marcus earlier began to applaud, having overheard the conversation. Sarah looked confused by all the noise and attention. "Marcus, what's going on? Why are all these people here?" Marcus felt a bit embarrassed. "Well, it seems that word got out about a Queen's Guard helping someone, and people were interested in the story. There's even a journalist here who wants to write about what happened." Sarah's expression grew worried. "Oh no, I don't want you getting in trouble because of me. Are you going to be in trouble with your superiors for talking to the press?" The journalist stepped forward. "Actually, miss, if I may, this isn't about anyone getting in trouble. This is about showcasing the kind of everyday heroism that makes London special. And from what I've overheard about your interview, it's also about challenging people's assumptions about what different people can accomplish." Dr. Hartwell, who had been listening from the doorway, stepped forward again. "I hope you don't mind me interrupting, but I couldn't help but overhear. Miss Chen, I want you to know that your interview convinced us that the National Gallery needs to think differently about accessibility and inclusion. We'd like you to start next Monday if you're interested." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Sarah stood there, tears streaming down her face, completely overwhelmed by the turn her day had taken. Marcus stepped closer to her. "Sarah, are you okay?" She reached out and found his hand. "I can't believe this is real. This morning I was just another job applicant struggling with a medical condition and worried about my future. Now I have my dream job, and apparently I'm part of some kind of inspiring news story." "Sometimes," Marcus said quietly, "the best things in life happen when we least expect them, when we're just trying to help someone cross the street safely." 3 weeks later, Marcus found himself standing outside the National Gallery again, but this time he was in full ceremonial uniform. Word of his act of kindness had reached his commanding officers, who, instead of disciplining him, had arranged for him to participate in a special ceremony recognizing community service by members of the Royal Guard. Sarah was inside, leading her third tour group since starting her new job. Marcus could hear her voice carrying through the entrance as she guided visitors through the Renaissance collection. Her confidence had grown tremendously, and according to Dr. Hartwell, visitor feedback about Sarah's tours was overwhelmingly positive. The journalist from the London Herald had written a story that went viral, not just in London but internationally. The headline read, "Royal Guard's split-second decision saves life and changes two futures forever." The article had sparked conversations about disability awareness, random acts of kindness, and how chance encounters can transform lives. But for Marcus and Sarah, the media attention had been just the beginning of an unexpected friendship. They met for coffee twice a week, and Marcus had become fascinated by Sarah's perspective on art and history. She, in turn, was intrigued by his stories of military service and the discipline required to be a Queen's Guard. As Marcus waited outside the gallery, he reflected on how much his life had changed since that Tuesday afternoon. His commanding officer, Colonel Williams, had called him into the office the day after the newspaper story ran. Marcus had expected a reprimand for speaking to the press, but instead found himself being commended for representing the values of the Royal Guard in civilian life. "Thompson," the colonel had said, "the Queen's Guard serves as a symbol of British values, even when off duty. Your actions that day exemplified the service and protection we represent. The royal family has taken notice." That conversation had led to today's ceremony, where Marcus would be formally recognized alongside several other service members who had gone above and beyond in their communities. But more importantly to Marcus, it had led to a deeper friendship with Sarah and a new understanding of his role beyond just standing guard. Inside the gallery, Sarah was concluding her tour with a group of visitors from Japan. "And this brings us to the end of our journey through Renaissance art," she was saying. "But before you leave, I want you to remember that every painting we've seen today was created by someone who saw the world differently than everyone else. Art is about perspective, and the most beautiful thing about being human is that we all have different ways of seeing and understanding the world around us." One of the visitors, an elderly Japanese woman, approached Sarah after the tour. Through a translator, she said, "My granddaughter is blind like you. When I go home to Tokyo, I will tell her about the brilliant woman at the London National Gallery who showed me that blindness is not about what you cannot see, but about seeing things others miss." Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes. These moments happened regularly now. Visitors who saw past her disability and recognized her expertise, or people who were inspired to think differently about the capabilities of people with disabilities. The medical tests had shown that her dizzy spells were caused by a minor inner ear condition that was easily managed with medication. She hadn't had an episode since starting her new job. As Sarah finished her workday and prepared to leave the gallery, Dr. Hartwell approached her with exciting news. "Sarah, I've just received a call from the Tate Modern. They've heard about your innovative approach to accessibility tours, and they want to discuss having you consult on developing similar programs there. This could be the beginning of changing how museums across London think about inclusive programming." Sarah was amazed. "Dr. Hartwell, 3 weeks ago I was worried about whether I'd ever find stable employment. Now you're telling me I might be able to help transform museum accessibility across the city? Sometimes the most unexpected encounters lead to the most extraordinary opportunities," Dr. Hartwell replied with a smile. "Your perspective is exactly what the museum world needs." As Sarah left the gallery, she found Marcus waiting outside, still in his ceremonial uniform. Even though she couldn't see the elaborate details of his dress uniform, she had learned to recognize his presence by his breathing patterns and the subtle sounds his military boots made on different surfaces. "How did the ceremony go?" she asked, as they began walking toward their favorite coffee shop. "Surreal," Marcus replied. "I kept thinking about how strange it is that helping someone cross the street safely led to all of this attention. Though I have to admit Colonel Williams seemed pleased that one of his guards was representing the service well in civilian situations." They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Sarah spoke again. "Marcus, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you had been 5 minutes earlier or later that day? If you had taken a different route to meet your sister?" Marcus considered the question. "I used to believe that everything happened for a reason, but military service taught me that life is often just random events and how we choose to respond to them. But meeting you, it makes me think that maybe some encounters are meant to happen." Sarah smiled. "I've been thinking the same thing. My doctors say that if I hadn't gotten dizzy that day, I probably would have made it to my interview just fine. Gotten the job based on my qualifications alone, and never had any of these amazing opportunities that came from the media attention." "So you're saying that your medical condition, which you were worried would hurt your career, actually ended up helping it in the most unexpected way possible, and your split-second decision to help a stranger led to you being formally recognized by the Royal Guard, and probably helped your career too." As they reached the coffee shop, Marcus held the door open for Sarah. "You know what I find most amazing about all of this?" "What's that?" "We keep talking about how that moment changed our lives, but I think the real change has been getting to know each other over these past few weeks. The job recognition and media attention will fade, but I hope our friendship doesn't." Sarah reached out and squeezed his arm gently. "Marcus Thompson, I don't think you need to worry about that." 6 months after their first meeting, Marcus and Sarah had become inseparable friends, and their story had taken on a life of its own that neither of them had expected. Sarah's work at the National Gallery had been so successful that she was now consulting with museums across Europe about accessibility programming. Marcus had been promoted within the Queen's Guard and had been selected to train new recruits, partly because of his demonstrated character in civilian situations. But the most surprising development came on a crisp October morning when Dr. Hartwell called Sarah into her office with news that would change everything again. "Sarah, I've just received a very unusual phone call," Dr. Hartwell began, barely able to contain her excitement. "It was from Buckingham Palace. Apparently, your story and your work here have reached the attention of some very high-ranking people. They would like to invite you and Sergeant Thompson to a private audience." Sarah felt her knees go weak. "A private audience? With whom exactly?" I think you know, Dr. Hartwell replied with a grin. Meanwhile, at Wellington Barracks, Marcus was having a similar conversation with Colonel Williams. Thompson, I need you to understand that this is unprecedented. Private audiences are typically reserved for heads of state, distinguished service members with decades of exemplary service, or individuals who have made extraordinary contributions to the Commonwealth. Marcus felt overwhelmed. Sir, I just helped someone cross the street safely. I don't understand how that merits this level of recognition. Thompson, sometimes a single act of kindness represents everything an institution stands for. Your actions that day, and how you've conducted yourself since, embody the values we want the Queen's Guard to represent. Plus, Miss Chen's subsequent achievements have shown how one moment of human decency can create ripples that touch hundreds of lives. The private audience was scheduled for the following Tuesday, exactly 7 months after Marcus and Sarah's first meeting. As they prepared for the meeting, both felt nervous about the formality and protocol involved. Sarah had spent days researching proper etiquette for royal audiences. Marcus, what if I make a mistake? What if I trip or say something inappropriate? Marcus, who despite his military training had never been in such an intimate royal setting, was equally anxious. Sarah, if anyone deserves to be there, it's you. Your work has inspired museums across 3 countries to rethink accessibility. You've proven that when institutions remove barriers, everyone benefits. The day of the audience arrived with typical London autumn weather, gray skies and intermittent rain. Marcus wore his finest dress uniform, and Sarah had chosen an elegant navy blue dress that her sister had helped her select. They met outside Buckingham Palace, where a private secretary escorted them through corridors that few civilians ever see. The private sitting room where the audience took place was smaller and more intimate than either had expected. When they were introduced to Her Majesty, both Marcus and Sarah were struck by how genuinely interested she seemed in their story. Sergeant Thompson, Miss Chen, the Queen began, I wanted to meet you both because your story represents something very important about British society. Sergeant Thompson, your quick thinking and compassion exemplify what we hope to see from those who serve. And Miss Chen, your determination and expertise have shown how much we gain when we create opportunities for everyone to contribute their talents. Sarah found her voice first. Your Majesty, I need you to know that none of my achievements would have been possible without Sergeant Thompson's kindness that day. He didn't just help me cross a street, he helped me cross into a new life. The Queen smiled. Miss Chen, I understand you've been working with museums across Europe now? Yes, Your Majesty. We've discovered that when museums design programs for people with disabilities, those programs often enhance the experience for all visitors. Audio tours that I helped develop for blind visitors are now popular with sighted visitors who want to experience art in new ways. Marcus watched Sarah speak with such confidence and poise about her work. The shy, disoriented woman he'd met 7 months ago had become a respected expert whose insights were sought internationally. The Queen turned to Marcus. Sergeant Thompson, I'm told that you've requested to remain in active service, rather than pursue some of the career opportunities that have come your way as a result of the publicity. Yes, Your Majesty. I love serving as one of your guards. The media attention has been flattering, but my duty is here. And yet, I understand you've been instrumental in developing new training programs for the Guard? Marcus nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. We're now incorporating community engagement training into our preparation. Guards learn not just about ceremonial duties, but about representing British values in all their interactions with the public. The conversation continued for nearly 30 minutes, much longer than typical audiences. As it concluded, the Queen made a statement that neither Marcus nor Sarah would ever forget. I want you both to know that your story has been shared with my family and senior staff as an example of how individual acts of kindness can create positive change that extends far beyond what we might imagine. Miss Chen, your work is changing how cultural institutions serve all members of society. Sergeant Thompson, your example is helping redefine what service means in the modern era. As they left Buckingham Palace that afternoon, both Marcus and Sarah were quiet, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Finally, Sarah spoke. Marcus, Do you realize that 7 months ago, we were just two people who happened to be at the same street corner at the same moment? Marcus looked at the woman walking beside him. No longer the uncertain job applicant he'd helped that day, but a confident professional whose work was making a difference across Europe. Someone whose friendship had enriched his own life immeasurably. Sarah, I've learned something important from all of this. We never know when a single moment of choosing to help someone might change everything. But more than that, the best things in life come from the connections we make with other people along the way. Sarah reached out and took his arm as they walked, the same gesture she'd made that first day when she needed guidance crossing the street. But now it was different. Not a gesture of dependence, but one of friendship and mutual support. So what happens next? Sarah asked. Marcus smiled. I think we keep doing what we're doing. You keep opening people's minds about what's possible, and I keep serving and learning from the amazing people I meet along the way. As they walked through the London streets where their story began, they passed the very intersection where Marcus had first seen Sarah about to step into traffic. They both recognized the spot without saying anything, but their steps slowed slightly. You know what's funny? Sarah said, breaking the comfortable silence. I walk past this corner every day now on my way to work, and I always think about how different my life would be if you hadn't been here that day. Marcus looked around at the busy intersection, watching other pedestrians navigate the crosswalk safely. I think about it too. But I also think about all the other moments of kindness that happen here every day that we never hear about. People helping elderly visitors with directions, someone returning a dropped wallet, a parent helping another parent with a struggling child. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. The media made our story special, but you're right. London is full of people looking out for each other every single day. They continued walking toward their usual coffee shop, passing tourists taking photos, street musicians playing for crowds, and the endless flow of London life happening around them. But now they were part of something larger, a story that had inspired others to believe in the power of small acts of kindness. As they reached the coffee shop, the owner, Mrs. Patterson, greeted them with her usual warm smile. Over the months, she had become part of their routine, always saving their favorite table by the window and knowing their orders by heart. How did it go today, you two? She asked, though she could tell from their expressions that something significant had happened. Let's just say it was a day we'll never forget, Marcus replied, holding the door open for Sarah. Sarah smiled as she settled into her chair. Mrs. Patterson, do you believe that some meetings are meant to happen? The older woman paused thoughtfully. In my 60 years, I've learned that the most important encounters often seem like accidents at the time. But looking back, they feel like pieces of a puzzle that were always meant to fit together. As Marcus and Sarah sat together sharing coffee and reflecting on their extraordinary day, they realized that their story had become something bigger than either of them had imagined. It wasn't just about a guard helping a blind woman, or about overcoming disabilities, or even about royal recognition. It was about the simple truth that when we choose to help others, we often help ourselves in ways we never expected. It was about how one moment of human connection can create ripples that touch countless other lives. And it was about the beautiful unpredictability of life, where an ordinary Tuesday afternoon can become the beginning of an extraordinary journey. Marcus raised his coffee cup in a small toast. To chance encounters and the amazing places they can lead. Sarah clinked her cup against his. And to the courage to step out of our comfort zones and help a stranger. You never know how it might go.